Okay, so here we are with another episode of our We United podcast, where we are interviewing leaders in the electronics ecosystem who are really at the forefront of innovation, forefront of what we're doing here. And I am super honored to be here today with a colleague and friend, Martin Chatterton from EE Tech. Hello,
Hey,
Martin.
good morning, Jackie. How are you?
I am doing great here on a beautiful day in Southern California. So, Martin, just before we get started, let me just turn it over to you for a minute just to introduce yourself, your role, and what you do at EE Tech.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Martin Chatterton. I'm CEO of EE Tech. I've been CEO for about 15 months now, but I've worked in the industry quite a long time, about 25 years. And I guess I've had two prior, experiences in the semiconductor industry, starting out my career with a semiconductor manufacturer, a chip supplier. And then just recently, prior to joining EE Tech, I was a senior vice president of digital and data solutions at Arrow Electronics. So I joined Arrow in 2013 during the whole digital evolution, and we kind of built out that ecosystem. So that was a really great experience. And I joined EE Tech to kind of lead the organization into this next chapter.
Oh, that's awesome. And, you have a history, before coming into the electronics industry. So I'm going to backtrack first before we go forward.
Sure.
And I would like to know, and I think I mentioned this to you before, because we have a lot of young rising leaders in our industry, or even just people coming in from out of college, who maybe listen to these types of podcasts because they don't even know sometimes where to start, and they're feeling like, oh my goodness, how would I get to that role? Like, this seems like such a high mountain to climb when
Sure.
you're first starting out and you have no contacts. So let's just backtrack it. How did you get your start in your career journey?
Yeah.
Just the first job you had, even.
Yeah, that's a really good story. And I never saw myself in technology. I never saw myself certainly being a CEO. I went to engineering school, mechanical engineering, right? So I work for a software electronics company now, and mechanical engineering is really not anything I use anymore, right? So, but I do have a funny story to share. And I have two boys. I have two boys in their 20s, and they ask me the same question every day, Jackie, right? Like, what industry should I go into? One's in healthcare, one's in electronics. The one in electronics doesn't like electronics. That's okay. He tried it, right? And but the way I got into technology was a funny story. And we talk about unplanned events in life, right? So I don't know, I was probably 32, 33. I don't know what it was. I got out of engineering school. I went to work for General Signal, was an engineer sitting behind a big computer screen at the time, designing jet engines and parts that go into aircraft engines and things like that. And I was kind of bored. I was kind of bored doing that, and had bought my first house with my wife, and I was walking out of Home Depot, and every homeowner has probably been into Home Depot at least once or twice. And I was walking out of the parking lot in Home Depot, and a friend of mine I hadn't seen in several years, I said, "Hey, George, Martin, what are you doing?" Et cetera. And he was in technology, and he said, so we just got talking in the middle of the parking lot in Home Depot, right? Cars driving by, and I said, "Yeah, I'm looking maybe to do something different. I've been with this company for 7 or 8 years. I'm thinking about doing something different." He said, "Well," he said, "I have a friend that's in the technology industry, and they would you be willing to talk to them?" And so I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Let me reach out." And it just happened to be a company right in the same town that I live, and they're a good sponsor of yours too. So I put a plug in for them, Rochester Electronics, right? So Rochester happened to be located right in the same town. And long story short, that following week, they gave me a call and they said, "I hear you're looking to get into technology." Long story short, that conversation ended up into a 12-year career with Rochester.
Wow.
So, and then that ended up with a 10-year career at Arrow. And now that's ended up with a 2.5-year career at EE Tech. So in my story, it may not be all that interesting in the sense that it started in a Home Depot parking lot, but that's where it starts sometimes, right?
Well, I think it's really important for people to understand, though. We have people entering our industry a lot of times from word of mouth, good people bringing in other good people, right? So what you describe happens all the time. if you're working in an industry and somebody you know and like is needing an opportunity, you would recommend them. So it's something really important for our organizations to understand that as our people are satisfied and excited, they're going to be pulling in other people.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yes.
I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
business is like anything else. You surround your people, in your
Yeah.
personal life, you surround yourself with people that you trust, that you have something in common with. And business
Yeah.
isn't that different. Yeah.
It's so true. Okay, so let's regroup for a minute on the last time we saw each other in person. We were at Electronica in November in 2024. We are now in January 2025. And, let's talk about that real quick because I wanted to know your reflections on that because that was such a good kind of pulse on the scene, right? In
Yeah.
electronics and what's going on here. And we've heard all these things about the economy, and we saw a really tough year for a lot of organizations in 2024. But I'm going to turn it over to you to see what was your take from coming back from Electronica, and what are your projections for the market in 2025?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was, for those of us that were there in 2022, it was a very different Electronica this year,
Yeah.
right? 2022 was really probably a very unrealistic perception of what was happening in the market, right? We were in an economic bubble, and the electronics industry was right at the forefront of that, and there were records that had never been even heard of before, companies doubling in size, tripling in size. So 2022 was even though you like to think now that we should have known better, but when things are going really, really good, you like to think they're never going to stop, right? And so I think 2024 was where everything came back to reality, right?
Yeah.
And in 2 years is probably a good time to bring everything, kind of level things out. 1 year things can happen, but 2 years. And so, I think, I had met with a lot of CEOs of large publicly held companies and even small startup companies, and what I had heard back and what I was getting back and the same, and I think it confirmed what we see in our business too. We're cautiously optimistic that, we are in a growth mode. So we are seeing growth. The industry is seeing growth, but it's conservative growth, right? Single digit growth, right? The industry, if you look at the SIA or any of the other big industry forums out there, organizations, they're predicting anywhere from 11 to 15% growth this year. Now, I think most CEOs are hedging the bet and saying we're not going to be quite that high. I think most CEOs are looking at single digits, hoping that they're wrong, right? And it's going to be more. So I think, guidance going forward, and I know some CEOs, I was speaking to a CEO just the other day of a large public company, and he was saying, he said, we're going to be much more conservative on our guidance going forward. We're going to be a little bit more realistic. So I think, the tone overall at Electronica was, yes, it's coming back slower than we anticipated, but we're not going to try to predict the future and predict we're going to have record growth or anything like that. So a very conservative, realistic, cautiously optimistic approach. That's what I heard. But again, during that time, everybody kept saying, have we hit the bottom? Have we hit the bottom? I think we have, right? I mean, that I think we can answer that. That question is yes, we have. So the good news is we have, and now the question is, how long does it take to come back up to normal balance?
Yes. Yes. So I agree with you. I also do think, surprisingly, this is what I was surprised about, how much enthusiasm I saw. So I agree with you. We're level setting. I'm going to throw this out there too, and maybe people won't agree with this, but this is just how I look at this whole situation that happened since COVID. Is your growth? If you look at 2019. Have you grown since then? If you could take out everything in between and you look at 2019, where were you in 2023, 2024? So if you can look at that compared to 2019 and you are up, you are growing. So that was an extremely unprecedented, but also just unrealistic time to set that as a benchmark for what we should expect. It was highly unrealistic, and it's important and critical that the market did adjust and people got back to a regular and a very realistic way of projecting, because what we saw happen in our industry was highly unfortunate, that people had such high expectations coming off of COVID that we went into probably the most amount of layoffs we've ever had in the last couple of years,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with that, Jackie. I think, again, if you go, I think, 20 years from now, whatever the time frame is, there needs to be an asterisk next to these last 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
These were not, these were not normal times. So.
Yeah, and not to disparage or not give credit to all those companies that grew, but you can't really pat yourself on the back too much
Right.
for all the growth during that time. You've really, the true test is if you did grow since 2019. Now, very happy to report that we just did our annual report that will be released soon for 2024. And I am so grateful to organizations like you. And if I look at our sponsor companies, these are incredibly solid industry driving leading organizations. Our funding goal was met by 113% during the hardest time that I've ever seen in the history of my career in this industry. And our membership goal was exceeded by 140%. So, I think it's really important to have these conversations, because when you're surrounding yourself, like you said, with all the right people and all the right companies who are set up for longevity, for stability, you can ride through some of these
Right. Absolutely.
times.
Absolutely. What do they say? It's the toughest time to lead is during, a crisis, right? And
Yes.
that's true in business too, right? So.
Yes, it is. Okay, so Martin, I am so curious to ask you, because we had some meetings before you were at EE Tech and other capacities, right?
Right.
And here you are now as CEO of EE Tech. So what I wanted to know is, like, okay, how is this role, first of all, different than anything you've done in the past? Because you've had some critical roles.
Yeah.
But how is this, being CEO, different than anything you've experienced? We'll just start with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, one of the things that I've learned in this role, Jack, again, I've had organizations at Arrow where I had 1,000 people under me, right?
Yes.
But that title kind of brings a different expectation, right? When you're running an organization, and when you are looked at as that point of vision, right? That guiding force that's going to protect us, right? And
yes,
I almost think of it as like a protector, right? Our job is, is to make sure that your employees, your organizations, your partners are well taken care of, right?
Yes.
And so, one of the things that I've learned, and I've given this not speech, but this talk with other folks, and I think the one thing I would say is word choices are more important now than they were in other jobs or the careers. So, the choice of words, your tone, your inflection, your facial expressions. I hate to say that, but all those soft skills are extremely important. And most likely, if you've risen to the ranks of a senior whatever role, you've probably got the intelligence, you've probably got the work ethic, you've probably got the loyalty. I'm sure you have all that, or else you wouldn't get to that level. But what I think you have to practice is those soft skills. I think those soft skills are very important to practice, because people are looking at you. In what I find too, and it's just not EE Tech, but is you can't be looking for affirmation. People are not going to tell you you're doing a good job. They just aren't, right? You're going to get it through different ways. Some people are going to tell you, but you just have to get it from other ways. And the way you get it is by listening more and talking less. That's how you really understand, is your messaging being heard? Is your direction being followed? Is your strategy being do people agree with your strategy? And again, all those things that maybe a CEO has to think about, but you have to look for ways to confirm that you're doing the right things, right? And yeah, numbers will speak, data will speak for itself. I get that, and we had a great year last year, and we're very proud of that, and we pitch that every time we get. But one of the things that I'm most proud of, which we don't talk about, is our attrition rate. We had the lowest attrition rate that we've ever had in the company last year.
Wow.
So we had a 2% attrition rate. And so we believe that, we're doing something right. And people are listening, but people are, more importantly, people are believing in the strategy in the future. Because at the end of the day, our job is to keep everyone moving in the same direction, gainfully employed, and providing for their family. Right, that's our job. And so, yeah, I think again, if I just boil it down to one or two things that I think are most important that I've learned is word choices, tone, transparency, communication. Just work on that every day. Some days you do it better than others, right? Some days you do it better than others, but just continue to work on that.
Oh, that is such good advice. And I was listening to one of our other council members was on a podcast recently, and he was saying trust, that in his role, he feels that, well, he came into an organization that's like, he had come into another industry, but how do you feel about building trust? So is all of this wrapped in with what you're saying? Have you found it to be a little bit difficult to build trust? Is that like a major thing that people have to be skilled at? Or do you feel that when you walked into your position, maybe enough people knew you or whatever, did they accept your vision? Have you had a hard time communicating and getting people really on board with that vision? How does that look for you?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think everyone has their view of trust, right? What trust means to them, in the business world. But and again, trust to me doesn't mean that somebody is always telling me the things I want to know or always agreeing with me. That's not trust, right? That's not trust at all.
Right.
But trust is, is something that I personally think. I almost think it's true in your personal life too, Jackie. It takes time. Right? When you meet somebody the first time, you can't. Yeah, there's a sense. We all have an innate sense, right? Of that person's a decent person. That animals have that, right? If you have an animal, they have an inherent sense. So I think we all have that to a degree, and we but that's just a test, right? That's not proof, right? Proof of trust comes over time. So I think you have to give it some time to build a working relationship with your peers, and that trust will evolve or it won't, right? It just won't, right? And so I think even in my previous careers, I think I've had to give it some time. I think, again, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been as patient as I am now. It's like, hey, trust should be something that we have. But I think trust is a two-way street for one, but you also have to be a little patient, and you have to really allow that person to get to know who you are. And that leads me into what I think is a character trait that I think we as leaders need to continue to work on as well, is empathy, right? They need to feel that you have empathy for them, that you can appreciate what they're in. Because again, you don't know what people are coming from. Some people share a lot about their personal life. Some people don't, right? So you don't know what's going on at home, or you don't know maybe you've done their job, maybe you haven't, right? So I think empathy is a big thing that goes right beside trust, right? But trust is something that will take time to build. How long? I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've had folks in my career where I've built a really solid trust factor within months. And I've also had people where it's taken years.
And it depends on the personality. I really like that a lot. So what other skills besides that? Because I think, we also have a lot of people in our industry that are ready for these next level roles. And then we have a lot of succession coming over the next 5 to 7 years, a lot of succession. So what are those? We mentioned soft skills, and you just mentioned it again with empathy. And I think it's so critical. But what are those actual hard skills that are needed? What do you look for, Martin, when you're hiring? So obviously you want somebody who's personable, somebody you feel you could trust, somebody, all of these things. And you don't know until in time, right? When you hire someone, it's just like you don't know until it's like being married. You don't know until you're really in the game. You don't know until you're actually looking across from each other, across the breakfast table. But what hard skills also are critical for people to also be developing along the way?
Yeah, and I think there is so much information out there today, right? We can pretty much, and there's exceptions, right? There's exceptions, and certainly, but we can pretty much teach ourselves anything we want today, right? I mean, there's these master classes and YouTube and everything else, right? And GPT. I mean, if you really want to learn something, you can learn it, right? And so I think, but before you do that, you got to have some critical thinking skills, right? You got to have passion to learn, right? You got to be constantly I always use this term because, I'm on the board of a few colleges here in Boston. So I think I just did my vocabulary, but a student of the industry. You have to kind of be a student of whatever industry you're in, right? Never stop learning. Never stop learning what it's like for somebody else's position. Or I have a great, we've had several people go through your mentorship program, right? Ben is one of them, I think, right? And he's a young man that we hired into a sales role, and we figured out that wasn't his calling. That really wasn't his calling, but there was another role that really was his calling. So, but he didn't wait for us to go teach him that. He taught that himself. He took it upon himself. He took courses. He became a mentee in your program. Those are the things that we look for: critical thinking, being able to research, identify, obviously all the other things that we all know, people that are good with data, applications, software. And that's why I always tell people, even though we sometimes think that young people love technology, there are a lot of young people that don't like technology, right? They have to get comfortable with technology, right?
Yes.
Right. And if you're not comfortable with technology, you kind of have to force yourself sometimes
Yes.
to do it. So you have to really, I say to people all the time is, the data analytics, all those kinds of things are important. And you just need to be able to learn quickly and continue to become a student of whatever you're doing.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. I laugh sometimes because, I look at being CEO of We, and there was when I was in school, I loved English, journalism, all these things. Couldn't stand things like law, things like engineering. Well, guess what?
Yes.
As I, have gone along the way, I now look back, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have taken some more law classes, because so much of what I do now has to do with protecting the organization, right? Like you mentioned, you're like the kind of mama bear, also protecting and making sure nobody's hurting your baby, right? And so making sure I'm legally protected. We're just a small little nonprofit. We don't have all these different departments, right? So I have to put my law hat on and learn a lot, right?
Right.
Learn about law. And now I look back, I'm like, oh, if I would have had a law degree, if I even, would have learned some of the technical stuff and not ditched those classes in high school, right? So that would have been a good thing. But, we're all just learning all the time. So I agree with you that people can learn anything. We're all pretty much the same.
It's just a question of whether you want to or not. And that's something you can't teach, right? You can't teach that, right? The desire to learn, the desire to figure it out, the critical thinking, that's something as employers and as leaders, we can't force people. They have to take it upon themselves.
I have two. So you mentioned something about being a hard worker. I would say if I look at some of our youth, I'm just saying some, I think that we're in a time, the youth coming in are going to be exceptional. Like I really do. I think this next generation coming in are game changers. I really, really do. Now, the one thing that I caution, and from what I notice, I think we've given people an almost unrealistic idea of what life balance is, because I look at myself coming up in the ranks too. There is no such thing. It's like you better love your job or what you're doing or where you're trying to go, because you want to be the first one on the scene. You want to be the last one leaving. You want to be working on the weekend if you have to. You want to be getting back to your customers. There's no such thing as this, life balance. That we even changed the name of our life balance series to be lifestyle. You don't want to be working 24 hours a day. We know that. But when you're in the grind, when you're in that time of trying to prove yourself, I don't know, maybe speak to that, Martin. What do you see in this regard? Is it possible for these young rising leaders to be clocking in at 8, clocking out at 4 or 5, and that's it? I mean, is that possible?
I think today, Jackie, you've got two different types of young aspiring people. We got two. I think, when you and I were getting out of college and growing, everybody was trying to run to the finish line as quick as we could, right? Because there was competition. There was a pressure to start your life, whatever that meant, all those kinds of things, right? Today, though, people are viewing young people, and I look at my kids the same way. They're viewing things very differently, right? There are some people that are going to be just like you and I. They want to make a mark as quick as they can, make as much money as they can, go up the corporate chain, and that's okay. And then there are going to be those people, I think, this is my opinion, that they do want a lifestyle that's a little different from that, right? And they're okay with being an individual contributor their entire career. They're okay with making what that appropriate salary is because they want some other things in life, right? And so I think, I think today we assumed, and maybe we just assumed it, I don't know, but I think there was, during a previous generation, there was more of the former, more people just all the same. Today, we don't have all the same. So I think when you hire people, you need to recognize why is that person here? Why is that person here? So I'll give you an example. We have employees at EE Tech that are, and our average employee base is very, very young. And, so we have young folks there that are showing up early, working late, whatever that means. It could be virtually or physically, it doesn't matter. People that are taking courses on their own, people that are always coming and saying, hey, how can I show more value, or just attempting to show more value. And then we've got people that have been in a similar role or same role for 4 or 5 years and are completely happy. And they're knocking it out of the park. And that's okay too, right? That's okay too. And so we have to, I think as leaders today, again, it's so easy for us, as leaders and maybe parents, right, to say, get out there. You got to get there early. You got to stay late, right? But I think we also have to understand that there is no one type of employee anymore. There's many types, and you have to. And I think if you had an organization full of those people that get there early, stay late, I'm just using that as an analogy, I'm not physically meaning that, then that would have its own challenges, right? So I think you gotta have a blend, and you have to be able to offer things to people that will allow them to provide the I think you said lifestyle. The lifestyle that they're looking for, because there is no one lifestyle anymore. I mean, we see that again, just getting way outside the lines here. We see this even in people's relationships, the idea of marriage today, and when people get married or having kids, those are all, there is no expectation anymore. These are all individual choices that people make. And I'm glad, frankly, that there's less pressure like that.
Yes, me too. And it's just to circle back, because I know this is going to sound like old timer conversation, but I really do think that we had a lot of pressure on us for a lot of things. You needed to be, especially as a woman, you should be married by a certain time. You should have kids by a certain time. You should retire by a certain time. And the number in my head was always 55. It's like, oh, I got to hurry up because I have to save enough money for the rest of my life by the time I'm 55. And now I laugh and I tell my kids too, like, okay, realistically, you're going to be working way longer than you ever thought. So you don't have to rush the whole deal. And, just enjoy along the way a little bit, because I felt like, oh my gosh, like I got to retire by 55. Well, really, I'm 54. I'm not retiring for quite a while. So sorry, that was like a life's big joke. Yeah.
But you are right. No, you are right. And I think, those, and you read a lot about that. And again, I'm glad I'm doing this podcast, because I listen to a lot of podcasts too, and I get different perspectives of things. Right. Yeah. And, but again, I think as a leader now, looking at the organization from the top down, what we've tried to do at EE Tech is to provide a structure that allows for both of those types of people. And there's probably a third and a fourth type, but those are the two primary types. And I think people can have success in either way, right? I mean, how people measure success is not all the same.
I think that the point of that conversation too is to say, know who you are, know what you want, do your own assessment. And like you said, it's okay. I'll tell you, I'm planning on leading WE for quite a while, but it does sound like at some point I would just love to be in one of those roles. Tell me what to do. I'll do it. I don't want to be, you know what I mean? So you might even go through different phases of your life where at some times you're more that individual contributor and you're super happy with it. And other times you're pushing forward, right?
I joke with my wife. I said, my technology industry started with Home Depot. Maybe it'll end with Home Depot. Who knows? But any event, no, it's all joking aside.
Martin.
yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun for sure.
It's so funny that you said, I just have to throw this out there. I was just telling a friend the other day, I'm like, well, maybe my, life plan, and when someday I'm really slowing down, I just want to go work at Trader Joe's,
Yeah.
right?
Man, yeah, nothing,
It's just,
and I want to just kind of go back and reframe what I said there for 1 second, is because I think, again, I think, I think at the end of the day, despite the fact that we have different types of people, the one thing I do try to encourage all of our employees, and no matter where
yep.
they are in their lifestyle balance, it doesn't matter, is
Okay.
to be fully engaged in whatever you do, though. Be fully
Yep.
engaged. Be fully engaged. Don't be a sideliner. Be engaged, because that isn't going to help anyone. It's not going to help the business. At the end of the day, again, we do town hall calls and stuff, and people that are doing engineering and graphic design and all those stuff that I can't do, they could care less about what was your revenue last year and how much were your profits. They could care less. But I say you do need to care about that, because that is what drives the business, right? So you need to always think in your mind, how are you contributing to that growth or to that profitability? Because if the company isn't growing, you're not going to grow. You're not going to grow. So you may not care about that stuff, but you do need to care enough to say, how am I contributing to that? And if you're not contributing to that, you need to take it upon yourself and go find ways to do that.
Oh my gosh, Martin, that is the best advice ever. I 100% agree with you. Be a contributor no matter where you are, what you're doing, but take it upon yourself to know. Now, also as CEO of EE Tech, also, do you provide those opportunities for the various departments to know how they are contributing to the overall goal and the revenue of the organization?
Yeah, we have this thing. I started it, and I one of my mentors years ago, told me this, and when I was with Arrow's a big company, and they do a lot of corporate training, and I had an executive coach for several years, so some of that I probably got from there. But town hall calls and all those big events are great, but it's one-way communication. It really is. It's a one-way. Nobody's going to ask questions, and it's a one-way communication. So what we do is we have town hall calls every quarter to explain to people how we've done and what the strategic direction is and how we're tracking against our plan and our strategic goals. And then what we have is we change up the name depending on the year, but we have one. But next week is starting. We have what we call fireside chats. And these fireside chats are smaller, intimate groups, and we have about I think we divide the company up into 8 or 10 different fireside chats, and then it could be myself and one of the leaders of that group, and we have an intimate call with them, and where there's 6 to 10, I don't know, 6 to 10, 6 to 12 people, where people are feeling comfortable, they're being able to ask questions and get into the detail. And that's where we kind of use those times too, where we kind of drive a message back to kind of show, if they don't know, we show them how they're contributing to our success. If they don't know, we show that. We kind of connect the dots for them. Yeah.
That's a good best practice for any leaders listening, is to help them understand how they're contributing, even if they don't know, to show them how. And I love the idea of the fireside chats too, because I think it pulls people in, and to really understand and keep them motivated. I think it's one of the hardest jobs of a CEO of an organization: keep people motivated, keep them seeing the vision, keep them right.
And I would say this to anyone out there, if they're thinking this, like, all right, it's, as we work and again, we work in a different environment. Like, I'm north of Boston, you're Southern California, we're in top sides of the country. Right. And 65% of our employee base at EE Tech is remote. So we have to work a little harder, right? We have to work a little harder to keep that chemistry and keep that collaboration, but there are ways to do that. So I would just encourage all of us out there, if you're an employee or you're a leader, or whatever it might be, and you say, well, communication is hard when you never see anyone. It is harder, but there are ways of doing it. There are ways of doing it.
Yep. Don't throw the baby away with the bathwater, right? Like, just because it's hard, it's not what we're used to. It doesn't mean it can't happen. So before we get to our final question, these interviews go so fast. I wanted to ask you, like you talked about the soft skills and the human skills and all that. So, as a human being, as a leader, I think one of the major differentiating factors nowadays is seeing leaders as human beings. We used to see them almost like a robot, like,
Yeah.
right? And you're a human being, just like anybody else. So, what are those things in life? If you could say, what makes you the happiest, most joy in your life, and what are those some of those things that could make you just cry in your soul?
In my personal life or my business life or both?
Whatever, like, yeah, it's all connected. Just
Yes,
in
all connected.
life, if you're looking
Yeah.
as a human being, and if we all reach the end someday, and it's like, what are those things that have brought you the most amount of joy, and
Okay.
what are the things that have caused you the most amount of pain, personal or professional?
Yeah, I would say this, and yeah, I would. I don't even think about this, and again, some of this has to do. I think it's hard for a young person, maybe in their 20s or 30s, whatever that is, or just when you get into a new industry. Like I said, I didn't get into this industry until I was 33, 34, right? So I think that for me, having people reconnect with you or helping people along your way that you've seen grow, right? Like there's
Uh-huh.
so many people in my career that I could say, and I don't, and I take pride in it, but I don't believe it was all me. I had something to do with it, right?
Right.
And but there are so many people that we've that have started out in their career, joining an organization, giving them their first job, right? Taking a chance on them, and then that person becoming, the next CEO of the company, right? Whatever that is. But there's so many people that I still stay connected with that have done so well in their career, and I had a small piece to do with that, right? So that's really encouraging. And then knowing that doesn't have to stop, right? At any age, right? You can keep doing that until whenever, right? You just have to put yourself out there. I think the other thing too is I think that's an enjoy, and then also just seeing, I'm a very much I want to, and maybe that's why I go back to this Home Depot. Maybe that's why I go to Home Depot. I like to do things where I can show progress. Or what did we accomplish, right? So seeing what you've accomplished, and again, CEOs, you look at spreadsheets a lot of time, and that's great. You see growth, but also just seeing other things like how you've satisfied a customer problem or how you've created a new product, right? We have some digital AI tools that we've just launched this past year, and seeing companies like Microchip putting them to use and all that. It's like, wow, we started that, we created that. So building something, I guess, would be to say, and I get that both in my personal life and my career. And then I think the challenge is just the challenges in life is just, I think, time. I think we're all impatient people to some degree, and we all want immediate gratification. And I don't know where my cell phone is. I probably turned it off, but these cell phones are, our way we live, our constant communication. And we've talked about this, Jackie. You text your son or daughter and you don't get an instant response. It's like, well, what are they doing, right?
Yeah.
If our brain is so conditioned today to think that we have instant gratification, instant results, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
that's not the case. In business, it takes a long time to build a company, to introduce a new product, to do whatever, right? But you need to be in it for the journey, right? And so I think that's the biggest challenge that I have, is just patience in general, because everything is expected to happen so quick today. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they have to move quick, right? And sometimes you have to tell yourself it's just not possible, right? So.
I love that. I think those are excellent insights. And I do think that I think it's my biggest bugaboo is patience. It's
Yeah.
always been. And I think about a lot of our young people coming into the industry, it's probably going to be theirs because they're brought up in a very different world, right? So
Really.
it's really good insight and reminder. But really, to conclude, here we are having a We United podcast, and I'm so honored, Martin, because I know how busy you are. So I'm so grateful that you took the time, because I love just hearing from you and getting your insights, but also, you're on our council now. And I think that's awesome too. It's been a great addition. And, but what are your insights? So, I have to always be looking at this as like, what's the value for we? Is there a value proposition in this industry that's, solid enough for where we're going moving forward, right? And always relooking at these things, and love getting insights from people like you and other council members. But what is your take on this? Why are you involved with we? What are you hoping to accomplish out of our partnership? And what are your insights?
Right. No, yeah. And you're right, Jack. It started, when I was at my other company, right? I still remember the very
Yeah.
first conversation we had.
Yes.
And I knew nothing about we, and I'd been in the industry, and you had been out there for several years. So when did you start we, Jackie?
2017.
Yeah. So you'd been out there for at least 3 or 4 years. So,
Yeah.
but I wasn't aware of it. I think there's still a lot of people out there that aren't aware of what you do, right? And the name really isn't indicative of all the things that this company, that this
Yes.
organization stands for, right?
Yes.
And so for us, as we've slowly got more and more and more involved, and again, I think we'll continue to get more involved in the years to go on. But for us, it starts with a belief in the mission of we, and not just mine, but my organization. I'll be totally honest with you. When we had the opportunity to get more involved with we, I took it to my leadership team at EE Tech. I said, "What do you guys think? It can't be just me believing in it. We got to believe in it as an organization." And they were. And I'd say most of them weren't aware of what you did, right? Mm-hmm. So I know you spend days and nights and weekends, working on that. But so once you figure out what you guys do through your mentorship programs, through your summit, and all those other things, how you bring people together, and I just put a little plug out here for your summit. It's not the normal. It's not the traditional summit where you go and sit in chairs and listen to a bunch of people speak. It's highly, highly engaging, and it's a great networking opportunity as well. But for us, it's really making sure that the industry is well represented, right? And for us, having a younger workforce, they see themselves as the next leaders as well, and we want them to see themselves as the next leaders. And by being part of this organization, they're able to see case studies and stories of other people, not just like, you can do it, right? As parents, we tell our kids, you can do anything, right? But when they speak to somebody that's actually done it, that means a lot. And I think we brings a lot of credibility to all the men and women that you have speak on behalf of their careers and what they've done and how they've progressed, and the challenges that they've had as a woman or even as a man, right? You bring that to the surface, and then obviously you back that up with research, right? Because sometimes our perception isn't reality, right? The research is still there, right? So for us, it's been a home run, and we've not only have we done all those things, it's a great opportunity for us to network and collaborate with other people. The council's great. Your events are great. We've been able to touch base with people through your organization that we would never have been able to connect with otherwise. So for us, it's part of our fabric now, and we believe in it. And I encourage other folks, if they're interested, reach out. But sometimes starting small, sometimes taking that first step. It doesn't have to be a big first step. Just take a first step.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that so much, Martin, very much. And really, for those, there's plenty of people in the industry who maybe don't understand, and maybe it's just not on their radar. You happen to be a very open and more progressive type of leader. I notice if I look at our council members, I'm like, why would these people be on? Little old we're just a little organization, right? And they're more the progressive types. They're more... Right. What you talked about is just always learning and reaching and doing something different, movers and shakers. I mean, we've got amazing council. But what I'm finding is it's not a representation of everyone, right? And no disparagement, but with those people who don't understand and just kind of feel like, I don't have time, I have so many other things to do. What would be your message? Like, how would we reach these people, Martin? Like,
right.
How do we reach these people?
I think I think sometimes I think it might be from the ground up type thing.
Yes.
For if you're an executive, you got people coming at you all day wanting things and wanting money and that kind of stuff. Right? But I'm a firm believer. I mean, you know the people at EE Tech, the folks that have been to your
Yes.
summit. They're true
Yes.
believers. They talk about we more than I do, right? They are the true believers in it, right?
Right.
So I think if there's anybody out there that listens to this podcast or wants to get involved, maybe don't wait for your CEO or leader to bring it to you. You bring it to them. You bring it to them. Say, hey, there's this organization out there that I think we should get involved with, right? And bring it to them, and maybe it needs to start the other way, not top down, but bottom up. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Martin. I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
really, any final words on industry, EE Tech, any final messages before we conclude for the interview?
No, I would just say thank you, Jackie, for the time today. It's been a pleasure sharing my thoughts. One person's thoughts, right? Get as many thoughts as you possibly can. As a leader, get as many thoughts, get as many inputs, and listen more than you speak, that type of thing. But I would also say too is, it's a great industry. Our industry is going to be $1 trillion industry in the next 10 years. So yeah. I think, for a lot of people that may not know what the electronics industry is, this could be a way to learn as well with the WE organization. Check it out. I think it's a great opportunity to have a good career.
Yes, and what my final parting words for you, Martin, is, if I look at our different council members and why are they there, and I reflect back at some of our meetings before your time at EE Tech, I would say about you, you're open. And that's what I love about you as a leader. If I could say one thing, you're very open. You're not just set in your ways. You're very open to hearing. You're very open to listening. And I think that really is what opened the door for us years ago. It's just, you just had the ability and the desire to listen. It didn't mean you were going to make a decision, didn't mean you were going to whatever, but you were open. And so I love that about you so much, that you are. And I love that you are mentoring a lot of people, young rising leaders, because I think you're a really good role model. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, Martin, and say they have a question for you or they want to reach out to you, how does somebody get in touch with you?
It's really easy because our emails are the easiest company I've ever. So it's just my first name at eetech.com. So just Martin at eetech.com. It's really easy. Please reach out. If I can help you any way, anyhow, I'm always here. Absolutely.
Thank you, Martin. And you have a fabulous weekend, and we will look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Thanks, Jackie. Bye-bye.